Hey folks, there's a lot of skills that we have to cultivate and learn in the IT space, from network administration to storage arrays, the cloud, development, DevOps, the list goes on, right? But there's one skill that is kind of an umbrella over all of the others, and that is troubleshooting. Now, I would argue that troubleshooting is less of a skill and more of an art form. It's an art form that you build and cultivate over the span of your career. And for example, I'm way better at troubleshooting now than I was 20 years ago because I have the scope of 25 years of experience in the industry, right? And so with that in mind, I've got Paul Schnackenburg on the show today, and between the two of us, we have decades worth of troubleshooting experience. And we thought it'd be fun to sit down and talk about the art of troubleshooting. So we've got that and lots more in today's episode of SysAdmin Weekly. It's a new week. That means it's time for SysAdmin Weekly. This is the show by sysadmins for sysadmins and dedicated to all those tireless tech folks working in the trenches day in and day out, sweating and toiling and, turning knobs and racking and stacking servers and all that fun stuff. This show is for you. My name is Andy Syrewicze. I'm your host, and I've got Paul Schnackenburg with me today. How's it going, Paul?
I'm good, Andy. How are you?
Doing good. It's we've had a lot of good topics, conversations you and I on this show over the last couple of weeks. But I think today is, this truly feels like a fundamentals type episode, but it's an important fundamentals episode. And of course, we're going to be talking about troubleshooting today, which I don't know. I found that sysadmins, they really love troubleshooting, or they get grumpy and irritated about troubleshooting. There doesn't seem to be in the middle. I always kind of liked it until, it's been the 16th hour. I've been trying to fix an issue and I'm still no further. That happens once in a while. But most of the time I enjoy the troubleshooting process because I'm a nerd like that, I guess. So,
okay. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say it's an age thing. I remember being young and fresh and going, "Oh wow, this is so cool! I get to figure out what's going on here." And now I'm like, "Oh my god, just bloody work!"
There are
causing problems,
right? There are caveats. I don't know why. When I have to troubleshoot my own stuff, I get super irritated and super grumpy. Like, there'll be stuff in my lab broken for like months at a time because I don't want to take the time to troubleshoot my own stuff. So that there are caveats, but anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, before we get to our main topic, again, troubleshooting, let's get to our, kind of our recurring segments that help keep this podcast timely. And of course, we're going to start with our News React segment. This is where myself and a co-host, we pick some news-related items that really kind of caught our eye and discuss them a little bit. And I feel like I always do the News React segment first, Paul, so I'm going to let you go first this time.
No worries. This is actually a repeat. So quite a few episodes ago now, I talked about SK, as in South Korea Telecom, I think they're called. They had a breach, and at the time they had to replace everybody's SIM card, and they had 27 million subscribers, so they had to replace the SIM card. Now we got some more news. We'll drop a link in the show notes, but basically, turns out they had been owned for 3 years. So once they started rolling incident response and started looking into their infrastructure, so 3 years they had been compromised before they finally realized and kicked them out. So, and I suppose the add-on I was going to say there, which is one of these challenging things, and this doesn't actually matter where you are in the world, whether you're in the US or I'm in Australia or you're in Europe. What's happened is that our smartphones has become such a large part of how we identify ourselves to a lot of the rest of society, your bank and your whatevers, right? And of course, telecom providers have never been good at security. They've been really, really good for the last 2 decades at making sure you can't make free calls, right? Anything that cost them money that didn't bring them revenue, right? They did that really well. For the rest of it, not so good, right? So classic example is we've had, is it close to a dozen telecom providers in the US compromised by Salt Typhoon, the Chinese, over the last few years. They've also expanded out to Europe and at least one Canadian telecom provider. So yeah, it's a bit of a thing relying on your telecom.
The last word I heard on the Salt Typhoon thing was they are isolated within the telecom networks, but they're still trying to chase them out. So I'm not sure how both of those things can be true, but that's just me.
Yeah, it's a bit of a thing, really. I mean, we got the whole thing. I mean, how many people have been compromised and have their cryptocurrency stolen because they got SIM swapped or something, or how many businesses have been broken into because they got SIM swapped, and that's also on the telecom providers. So anyway,
good times.
It's the old saying. I think it was a boss of CIA many years ago who said this: there's two kind of businesses in the world: those who know they've been hacked and those who don't. So that's 3 years.
That's probably true. And it maybe I'm just being pessimistic today, but it's like every time I see word of a breach in the news, I'm like, it's going to be worse than that. Let's give it a week or two. It's going to be worse than it sounds right now, and it's, I've been in security too long now, I guess. It's, I've lost that hopeful edge. Anyway. Well, speaking of security, of course, I have two short news items today. The second one is more of like I'm really happy about, but the first news item it's a repeat for me as well, strangely too. I don't know if it was you or Eric that was on for the episode where I talked about Citrix Bleed 2.
That was me.
But, yeah. So Citrix Bleed 2, it's affecting NetScaler devices again, right? And basically, this is a vulnerability where a threat actor can basically access parts of code remotely and get at things like secrets and login details and all kinds of fun stuff, right? It's 9.3 CVSS score, if I remember correctly, pretty bad. Everybody says it's a problem except for Citrix, so that's interesting. And the news article I read really caught my eye because there are now public exploits available. So you have NetScalers in your environment and you have not patched yet. Stop what you're doing and patch now, type of thing.
Yes, and also do some incident response and see if you've already been compromised, because they move fast nowadays.
They do.
You like when there is proof of concept available, if you haven't patched, you're just going to assume that you've been owned at that point.
For sure, exactly. If it's been out it's been a couple of weeks now. So, I mean, chances are you definitely want to take a look. And the big thing is, after you apply the firmware, go and look at your logs first. Because once you recycle the device from a firmware update, the logs are gone. I'm not a NetScaler guy, but from what I've read, the logs are gone after you upgrade the firmware. So if you want to look for those indicators of compromise, you want to do that before you bounce the box, right? So anyway.
Maybe export the logs as well, so you got a copy of them.
Yep, exactly. Yep. So the next one on my list for news is, like I said, just a really quick one. I'm really excited about it. Notepad in Windows 11 in preview now has Markdown support. You knew exactly where I was going with this when I said Notepad, didn't you, Paul?
I did. I knew.
Everybody on the show. Yeah, my co-hosts included know I'm obsessed with Markdown, and while I don't use Notepad that often these days, it's nice to know that it supports Markdown. So, very cool.
There you go.
Anyway. All right. Next up is our Nerd Hour segment. And of course, it doesn't take an hour, but basically, this is the segment of the show where my co-host and I, we talk about the nerdy, geeky, IT-ish type things that we're doing in either during our day job or our spare time. I'm going to pick a spare time type of item today. I've got a number of side projects that I'm currently working on. And again, people that watch and listen to the show, they know I like Markdown and Hugo, which is a static site generator for very simple web applications. It can read directly from a Git repo and build a site that's static. It's great. I really like it for most of my websites, but I have a need for a website that can do plugins and possibly e-commerce type of like a proper website this time. And so for the first time in, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years, now I'm looking at things like Joomla and WordPress, and the others escape me at the top of my head right now. Isn't there like a Drupal? Drupal's one too.
Yeah, I drew. Yeah. And WordPress, of course.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know a ton of the internet runs on WordPress, but like, that thing looks like Swiss cheese in terms of security, unless you take extreme steps to lock it down, So that's instantly why I start looking at alternatives, right? So I don't know where I'm going to land on that yet, but that's the nerdy stuff that I've been working on lately. How about you, Paul?
I've actually sort of got two, but I'm going to leave the Windows 365 link device till next time I'm on, because I've got a couple of things to sort out, and then I can give everybody sort of the big lowdown on everything I found when I installed it for a client, which is where I was yesterday. So I'm actually going to drop in one that I just saw pass my newsletter feed things I read. And this is actually a free tool from Push Security. So, one of the challenges is when you're in help desk and somebody calls up and says, hey, I'm John Doe, can you reset my MFA? Sure, what's your employee number? And they have the right answer. Okay, and what's your manager's name? Yeah, they got the right answer. And what's your whatever, right? They double check all those things. Okay, great. And of course, Scattered Spider or some other threat group got that information from LinkedIn, so they got the right answers. They sound like the right person. They got everything that the help desk process is asking for, and they get their MFA reset, and then you end up with something like Marks and Spencer compromised with ransomware in the UK, for example. So this is a free tool, Push Security, link in the show notes, that you just install an extension in the user's browser. And when they call up, the help desk person says, can you give me the 6-digit code from the extension in your browser? And that only works if you've got that extension installed, and that extension only is installed for your company with the right numbers if you deploy it, say, using Intune or some other MDM or whatever. So that's kind of a nice way of adding a layer of security. And since it's free, not a bad thing.
That's a fantastic idea, because, that makes it a lot more difficult for social engineering to happen. It's just one more thing the threat actors need. So they would have to actually compromise an endpoint, or I'm not familiar with the tool. There's probably some sort of join process for the tool that associates it with the company, right? So they'd have to either game that system, or they'd have to compromise an endpoint, neither of which are, the easiest, I'm sure. So that's...
Well, it adds a layer, right? Like if they're very, very determined, they might do that. But the groups who have been on a tear, including here in Australia, by the way, they actually owned a third-party provider to our biggest airline, Qantas. 6 million people, including me and my wife's information was in that breach. This is their modus operandi. They don't attack endpoints. They don't do phishing or anything else, right? Like they literally find out the information they need off social media, and then they call up the help desk. That's how they do it. Right. And large organizations is often an outsourced help desk, right? Like it's a little easier for somebody like me. I'm for those listeners who don't know, I run my own MSP. I've got a small handful of clients because I do a lot of other work. But I know most of those people by heart, unless me to be social engineered by somebody, because I would sort of recognize their voice, and somebody's going to say, well, that could be AI faked. Sure, but you're just adding more and more layers here. That's all it is, right?
Yep. That's a fantastic tool. Yeah, like you said, Paul, I'll make sure we get that in the show notes. That way you folks can check that out, and highly recommend you do so, because that's, if I was running a help desk or I was a CISO for a large organization, I'd be looking at that pretty hard right now. So very good. Well, On to our regularly scheduled programming, I suppose. And we are, of course, talking about troubleshooting today. And I would say troubleshooting is really, it's kind of the bread and butter for a sysadmin, right? Because I mean, I'd like to believe most of us probably got into IT because we liked solving problems. I don't know, Paul. When you were in school, did you like math? Were you a math guy?
Yeah.
Yep, so was I. I don't know what it is. Most IT folks I talked to enjoyed math. Uh, my son, he has no interest in IT. Also, not a math guy. Does not care for math. So there seems to be something about the problem-solving aspect is a big draw. But when
Yeah.
it comes to troubleshooting, I kind of feel like it's more than just a technical skill. There's really kind of an art to troubleshooting,
Yeah.
and every sysadmin really kind of has to, how do I put it, come down with their own habits and mindsets and come up with their own process for troubleshooting. Maybe not their own, but adopt some, best practice standard for troubleshooting, right? And I
Yeah.
guess where I would start with this is, you're sitting at your desk, help desk phone rings, and the sky is falling somewhere, right? Switches down, or whole data centers down, whatever. There's varying levels of problems, right? And the one thing that I've mentored a few junior IT folks in my day. The one thing that I always, when I was back in my MSP days, the one thing I always kind of impressed upon the new folks was like, okay, no chaotic clicking. Okay, yes, that whole customer's offline. Let's not do anything rash. Let's not panic. Let's work from a plan and let's not go by vibes, right? Yes, the
Yeah.
customer's saying, I'm down, I'm losing $50,000 an hour, whatever, fix it now. Okay, let's all take a breath and make sure we do this right because, and I'm sure you've seen this before too, Paul, you can make things worse potentially.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can absolutely make things worse if you try to move too quickly without thinking it through. And the important thing here is if it's somebody else calling you with a problem, right? No matter what the scope is here, you want to figure out what is actually the scope. Now, remember, in most cases, you're talking to non-technical people. They're not going to say, I went over to the switch cabinet and I looked at the switch and the lights are off, or the lights that usually blink stopped blinking, or whatever. They're not going to say that, right? They're going to say nothing is working. The internet is down is what they're going to tell you. And then you go,
Yep.
okay, don't think the internet is down. Let's start with one step at a time, right? So what you want to do is you want to scope it up. You want to say, is it just your computer? Is it all computers? Is it all computers in the office, or is it all computers in the whole business, right? Is it a specific program? Does it only happen on when you have this program, but somebody else can run the program? So you want to establish all those parameters. When did it stop working, right? What happened when it stopped working? Did you get an update? Did the computer say it had restarted overnight? So you need to get all those parameters around it because non-technical people aren't going to think about that.
Right.
So you want to sort of get the scope of what's actually happening here. Narrow it down to what's the actual area that's having a problem.
And once you've got scope defined, now you know at least where to start looking, right? Now you can start running a little bit of a playbook. So before we get to that playbook, Paul, something I thought of something that happened a long time ago when I talk about panicking and chaotic clicking and things like that. I wanted to tell a couple of stories throughout today's episode. This particular one, it's comical now, but we had a junior admin on the help desk. I think I was handling level 2 or L3 calls at that time. I don't remember exactly where I was in the hierarchy, but I was an escalation point. Anyway, this junior tech comes over to me and got his chest out, and he's just so proud of himself. I solved the problem type of thing. I'm like, okay, that's cool. So what happened? What do you got? Well, so and so called, and they said that their application was running really slow. Okay. Well, I logged into their systems. I saw that their SQL server was running really low on memory. I logged in and took a look at Task Manager to see what process was eating up the memory. And there was
there was this SQL Server exe process that was eating all the memory. So I ended the process, and and the server was good after that. Which, after I stopped screaming internally in my head, right? I'm like, why don't you give them a call and let them know we're still working on it? And I had to kindly explain to him like what the SQL Server exe process was and why so much memory is always in use on SQL servers. So that was a fun one. So maybe he wasn't panicked. It might have just been a case of being misinformed, but either case, you don't go clicking things that you don't know what the process is, right?
No, you definitely want to double check with someone. I got another good one here. This wasn't actually me. It was a mate of mine running an MSP also in this area. This is years ago. And they had customers all over the place. And for those of you who live not in Australia, we used to have, and it still is the case, fairly poor broadband, particularly in rural areas. Like if you live in a city, you can get good broadband, and now you can. But if you live out in some town, somewhere out back, as we call it here in Australia, it can be really bad. So help desk phone rings, tech picks up the phone, says, oh yeah, okay, so it's so-and-so from company so-and-so, we've got our office out in so-and-so, and the internet is really slow. And he goes, yeah, well, where did you say you were? Oh yeah, there. Oh, well, that's your problem then, and hung up. So they sent all of the engineers and the rest of the company to empathy training to understand how to actually talk to end users, because yes, that is probably the reason. You probably live out in Whoop Whoop, and that's why you can't get internet properly, but that's not what you're telling.
Oh yeah,
and you don't hang up.
Just move your business and it'll be solved.
Exactly. Easy peasy. Cheesy. Done.
Oh, good one. Anyway, so I think we've instilled the don't panic mindset here, hopefully. And, be sure of what you're doing before you do it, right? Which comes into kind of the plan aspect of troubleshooting. And I guess when we talk about troubleshooting, I think if I was going to instill one piece of knowledge on anyone who's learning proper troubleshooting skills, it might be this. I'm probably going to say that about a few things here, but I think it really applies to this. When you're troubleshooting, change one thing at a time. One thing at a time. Because if you change 4 things and it's magically resolved, you don't have root cause analysis done. You don't know what the problem was. It was one of those 4 things. Yeah, maybe somebody powered on a switch on the other side of the building as you were making those changes, right? I mean, that stuff happens, but you always want to change one thing at a time, because multiple variables creates ambiguity, makes it tough to track down the issue, right? It also makes it easier for you to roll back or isolate changes. So, like I mentioned at the beginning of the segment, right? There are cases where you could make things worse by doing the wrong thing. And sometimes that happens from the process of troubleshooting, and you want to be able to roll back easily. So that's another reason why.
Absolutely. And you want to document, I think we got that later as a point, but you want to document, you want to write down what you're doing along the way. I know you're 22 years old and you think you can remember every little step off by heart, but there's a lot of emotional pressure. I mean, depending on the troubleshooting situation, but if we have the businesses down and everybody screaming at you, there's definitely going to be pressure to do things really, really fast, but you want to write things down so you know what steps you took. And really what it comes back to, if we look at the step number 1, where we establish the context and everything around it, your next step really, before you start clicking anything, is forming a hypothesis. Yep. I think that the reason this isn't working is because of this. How can I test that? Well, I change this one thing and that'll tell me. You're trying to isolate it down, right, to figure out if I change this thing, well, then we know it's not that, right? Like if this user, it doesn't work when they log into this computer, but it works when they log into this computer over here. So there's clearly something to do with this computer, not the user profile, because that profile works well on the other computer, or whatever it is, right? Like you're trying to isolate which area of your problem it could be. And that's part of as you're building your hypothesis. And then you change one thing at a time and you write it down as you go.
Yep. And that documentation is ammunition, especially when you have to talk to vendors as well, which we're going to get to. But I think I've told this story on the show before. I'm going to tell it again here because it's applicable. I think you were the one, Paul. I told you my Comcast story, I think.
I think so.
Yep. So for the folks that maybe didn't hear that episode, I'll give the abridged version here. So I was having intermittent connectivity issues here at my house, internet connectivity. And Comcast is not known in the US for being the best internet provider, but it's the one I have in my area, so I'm kind of stuck. Anyway, I was having intermittent connectivity issues, and it would only happen during the hot months of the year, right? In Michigan, that's like 3 months, June, July, August. And it would be fine all night long, but then about 9, 10, 11 o'clock a.m. from there until about 5, 6, 7 in the evening, I would drop maybe 30% traffic every 30 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So really, really difficult to isolate. We talk about isolation. This is a very difficult problem to isolate because I can't replicate it on demand. There are 100 variables, right? I've got all the various cables in my house, and then it goes out to if you're not familiar with how coax works, it goes out to a junction box near the street in front of my house. And then it goes to a neighborhood junction box, and then from there taps into the Comcast network, right? So there's a lot of different points of failure here. So I updated and changed all of the different cables and stuff in my house that I could, and that didn't resolve it. Long story short, I basically started gathering ping data, up-down data, right? Which allowed me to ultimately build a heat chart, a heat map, right? For when the outages were occurring. And that's where I saw this almost 30 minutes on the dot during the hot hours of the day. Come to find out, me and one of the level 3 Comcast techs that came out, we discovered that the neighbor's air conditioner, every time their air conditioner turned on during the summer, the hot months, it was about every 30 minutes, it would backfeed through the electrical in his house into his cable modem down the coax line and would screw up the signal going into my run. So again, we talk about isolating issues. It's really hard when you can't isolate the issues, right? So that took me about 3 months to isolate that problem. So anyway.
I'm glad you hung in there. And that actually raises another point. In today's cloudy world, often there are parts of the system that you don't have any control over, you don't have any insight into. I mean, you might know that there is a junction box, and you might know that there is a central junction box for your neighborhood or whatever, but you can't walk into those and plug your tester in, you know what I mean? You have no control over that, right? Then the same thing with the cloud, right? We rely on Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace or whatever, right? And if they're having a problem, we need to have that signal because we can do all the troubleshooting we can in our end, but it's not our problem, right? So you got to identify that. And sometimes they say there isn't a problem in their end in the cloud, but you have to gather the data to be able to say, well, we have done all of this testing and it's not in our end.
Yep, exactly. And so that's kind of a nice segue into our next point, and that is logs. Find the logs, find the errors, and sometimes you have to build the logs yourself, right? So in my case, I logged in my cable modem, and I could see the interface flapping, because it was getting small jolts of electricity, right? But other than that, I didn't have any information, so I said, okay, what information can I get? I can get up-down information. And then maybe, an escalated technician and I from Comcast, maybe we can put 2 and 2 together and figure out what's going on. So he actually came, the guy that ended up helping me figure it out, he came out and he had his tester on the line during one of those 30-minute windows, and he saw it happen, right? So again, sometimes you have to make your own logs, but most of the time you're going to have logs to go off of, right? So Windows Event Viewer, you've got syslog in Linux, you've got, network device logs. Not everybody loves log analysis. I'm not one of those people. I hate log analysis. I'm okay at it. But I will say, and this is, we've been talking about a lot of past experiences. This is where I can tie it to modern day. AI is actually very good at log analysis. So I've actually seen cases where people have, dropped event viewer logs into Copilot and said, hey, I'm experiencing problem ABC. Do you see anything in the logs? And it can help you parse those logs. And the interesting thing about AI is it can see patterns that we as humans maybe don't.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we have more tools to parse logs today than we did back when we got started in IT, Paul.
Yeah, that's true. We're certainly doing things more manually. But having taught students for like 20 years in IT, literally beginning IT professionals, understanding that the logs is the place where you go and look is so important, right?
Yes.
Like once you've eliminated the super obvious stuff, right? Like, is the cable plugged in? Like your network is down. Is the cable actually plugged in? And that's another thing, actually, a little side note here. Techs, at least junior techs, tend to sort of jump to the complex answer. Right? And they spend 20 minutes trying to figure out why the software stack isn't receiving a signal. And then you go, have you jiggled the cable? You go jiggle the cable first, right? Like you do the absolute basics first, right? And you actually do the absolute basic before you do any of that is, have you tried turning it off and back on again? That's the super classic IT answer, right? Have you rebooted the thing, right? But then if it's still not working, then let's jiggle the cable. That doesn't fix it. Now let's look at something more complex than the, cleaner kicked the cable last night when you didn't notice. So
pretty much layer 1 of the OSI model. Is it plugged in,
So get comfortable with the Windows event log, for example, if we're talking about Windows system. Get comfortable understanding where do I go, what kind of logs are in each of them. You got system, application, and whatever the third one is off the top of my head, I can't remember. But anyway, there's 3 main ones, and there's a bunch of application-specific ones. If you're on a server system, there is specific channels for each of the server components. That's where you need to go and look, because there is logging, but you have to go and look there.
Exactly. And I mentioned Linux earlier, right? You got multiple different kinds of sys logs in Linux. It's going to depend on your distribution. So go look at your distribution. What sys log are they using? How do I look at it? Where are the logs stored? There's going to be documentation for that based on your distribution. It's going to be that way for your switches too. And so I think we've mentioned this once or twice already. Document your steps. But in troubleshooting, vendor documentation can be your best friend sometimes too, right? Like, okay, well, is this a known issue? And I guess when it comes to troubleshooting, after you've ruled out the obvious things and maybe you're still not 100% sure, you've narrowed it down to like these 2 or 3 things, but none of them seem probable. Doesn't seem to be functioning as it should be. Maybe you're looking at a situation where this is a bug, right? And so once I start feeling like, okay, this isn't so black and white anymore, I'm feeling like this is a bug, I'm going to go get the version information for whatever it is I'm trying to fix. I'm going to go out to the vendor's website and I'm going to start looking at bug reports. And that's a place I'm going to start looking as well too.
Yep. That absolutely makes sense. Another tip I have along the way here, and I actually got this from a cybersecurity conference, could have been Cactus Con maybe, the recording that I was listening to only like a week or 2 ago. It was a very sad story actually about an elderly couple who lost their life savings to a scam basically. And he detailed all the steps and how they thought, or she actually, because I don't know that she even told her husband, so she did all this by herself. Somehow she was convinced. It's a long story. I'm not going to go into the details, but she was convinced that the Department of Justice was going to put her in jail unless she did these things. So she converted their life savings to gold and God knows what and gave it to them. But his point was, how do we protect ourselves against this? Well, if you don't have anybody else to talk to, even talking it out aloud to yourself can actually give you an insight to, does this actually sound plausible? So this was in the case of you're trying to tell yourself, would the Department of Justice actually ask me to pay them in gold bars so that I wouldn't end up in jail? Does that sound reasonable? No, it doesn't sound reasonable. Right? And if you're doing troubleshooting, and this has been an ongoing joke between me and my wife and lots of other people who've heard me troubleshoot, because I tend to talk to myself. I literally will tend to talk to myself. I'll be saying, well, if that's connected to there and that's working over there, why is it not working over here? What's different with it? And I'll literally be talking to myself, right? And they do say it makes you a crazy person, but that's okay. I'm a good troubleshooter because of it, because it actually makes you sort of think about things in a slightly different way. And if you don't want to talk to yourself, go and talk to somebody else, right? Hey, Andy, I'm troubleshooting this thing over here. I've checked all these things and I'm trying to figure out this. Does that sound reasonable to you? Oh, no, mate. It doesn't work like that at all. You're looking in completely the wrong place. Oh, great. Then let's go and look over here.
Yep. That's absolutely great advice. Sometimes you have to crowdsource that, that troubleshooting knowledge, right? Excuse me. One of my favorite things about working in them at the MSP I did for many, many years was I was literally in a room with, 12 or 13 other engineers. Some of us would be on the road for the days, but on any given day, there were at least 7 or 8 of us in there, right? Yeah. And when I was part of that group, I was level 3. I was responsible for most of the hosted stuff inside of the data center we had on premise. So my stuff was very specific, but most of the guys in there and girls, they were working on customer issues on premise and some very similar stuff amongst most of them. Chances are, if you're working through an issue, in that case, you've got a group of people and you're not entirely sure what the issue is, chances are somebody in the room at least has a general idea. So if you start talking it out with other people, usually you'll come up with ideas and think of things that maybe you wouldn't by yourself. But I do want to bring it back to the talking to yourself thing for a second, because maybe this is an IT guy thing. I do it too. I'll do the same thing. I'll be sitting at my monitor. Well, okay, that's set up this way, and then that's going to route over here. And so I do that to myself too. And that's called rubber ducking, right? It's like, okay, you're sitting, staring at a rubber duck, talking to it. That's where the term comes from, right? But it's kind of comical, but it's less embarrassing than screaming at your monitor in anger, right? So that talking it out thing, there's some truth to that.
There's another version of that as well, depending on the kind of problem you're doing. If it's a complex problem with things connected, like it's a network issue and this computer can talk to that computer and this one can ping the router, but this one can't or whatever, drawing out a diagram is another great way of doing that. Like there's a whiteboard or piece of paper or whatever, right? And just draw it out and go, okay, well, because once you lay it out in that, rather than trying to hold it in your head and understanding all the connections in your head, you lay it all out on a piece of paper, on a whiteboard or whatever, and then you look at it and you go, oh, this thing is not talking to that thing. That's where the problem is, right? It's got to be there because that's the only place it could be, right? Or it could be these 2 places, but at least I've narrowed it down now so I can go and figure that out.
Yep. A year or 2 ago, no, it's longer than that now, 2-3 years ago, when I switched to Mac OS as my daily driver, I have a fairly complex audio setup here with all this different stuff I do. And sometimes I do live streaming and I need to redirect audio from a separate device over here, but get it out through the stream on my it's a whole thing, right? When I was learning the inner workings of the Mac OS audio subsystem, like I had a really hard time at first getting all of that audio routing right. And I did exactly that, Paul, as I actually drew a diagram of all the different logical pieces. And okay, I've got this third party driver that has to do this here. And then, so sometimes it helps you visualize and localize the issue. And I find that is especially true as well for virtualized setups as well, because you have VMs, you have virtual switches, sometimes you have virtual storage devices. You don't have these tangible things, right? So sometimes you have to draw it all out. And that's especially true if you're getting really crazy and doing nested virtualization scenarios. And if you're not familiar with nested virtualization, that is where you're actually running hypervisor inside of a virtual machine. So you have VMs inside of VMs. And there are some production use cases for it. So the one I can think of off the top of my head is back when a previous vendor I was with before we were bought out, we could back up virtual machines and then restore them in Azure if you did it in a nested hypervisor. And so I had to document all that whole process out so support could actually communicate the how to people that needed to do that. And I built diagrams because it's just so much easier to visualize all those. Okay, at what layer is the networking broken? Is it at the cloud layer or the first virtualization layer or the second virtual? You see there's when you have all that abstraction, it can get very complex sometimes.
It can, absolutely, and that's diagramming is a great way of doing it. Another thing I'm thinking of here, actually, this is another important thing, particularly for techs who are sort of starting out. There's part of your ego gets involved in the whole thing, right? And that is, I want to figure this problem out, right? Like, this problem is in front of me, and we get, at least some people do, and I have certainly have done that in the past. We get like a dog with a bone, right? Like we're just gonna, I'm gonna solve this thing. I gotta solve this thing, right? And then when you do that, if you're working at an MSP, for example, you work for somebody else, right? Like, that is completely the wrong approach. If you haven't made progress in, say, whatever the rule might be in your MSP, half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour, maybe 45 minutes. But if you haven't made progress, right, you're literally not getting anywhere. You haven't narrowed it down. You're not seeing where the problem is. You're not even coming up with where it could be, right? Like, you're not making progress. You need to put your hand up, right? It's not about your ego. It's not about you fixing it because you're the smartest person in the room. It's about getting the thing fixed. And if you have somebody else, like you had those engineers around you to ask, if you've got an online community, you got somebody phone a friend, they could pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm just looking at this problem. I'm not getting nowhere. Can you help me out? If all of that is preferable, right? And as we said before, if you've spent half an hour, 45 minutes on it, and you have nobody else to ask, you go, okay, I got to contact the vendor. Right? That's just, I'm going to have to contact support here, because nobody is going, like, the business is not going to go, oh yeah, you were so good. It took 6 hours, but you got there in the end. That was so great, right? We're really happy to pay you for 6 hours of your time, right? Like, it doesn't work like that.
Right. And that could be an especially difficult conversation if this is a time and materials customer where you're billing them by the hour. You know, they're going to get really upset, not only that they're down for 6 hours, but that they got billed for 6 hours worth of labor, right? And that's specific to an MSP or a service provider, right? If you're an internal IT department, you have to worry about the downtime, not necessarily the billing, but you might have other drama that you have to worry about.
The boss is also, I mean, somewhere there is somebody who's your manager, right? And they're trying to balance the resources they have in their chronically understaffed IT department. And you spending 6 hours on solving a problem that could have been solved in 1 hour if you talk to somebody else is not an efficient use of his resources, right? Or her resources. So they're going to come back to you anyway and say, hey, next time, don't spend this amount of time on something doggedly, just doing it by yourself. Like, reach out.
Yep. And this is another area where I always come back to this advice. And I mean, when I was a young IT, professional getting started, I struggle with this. I think everybody does. And that is the 3 words, I don't know. Practice saying them. I don't know. When you hear an IT person say the words, I don't know, they are a seasoned IT person, because you got to let your ego get out of the way and sometimes admit you don't know. And that's when you go get help. And I think that kind of dovetails into the next thing we were going to talk about. And that was contacting the vendor, which you mentioned, right? And so mileage may vary depending on the vendor you're talking to, right? Some vendors are much better than others. The support experience with vendors changes over the years. I'm looking at you, Microsoft. I'm sorry. It used to be when you call and get support from Microsoft years ago, you would learn more about the issue than you ever wanted to know. So the case I'm thinking of was I was with the MSP I was at, but this was a non-managed customer. They only picked up the phone and called us when they needed something, right? So we were not managing them. They had an NTFS volume go belly up one day. Surprise, there were no backups. And they absolutely needed the data on this volume. This was not a case of hardware failure. the NTFS file system itself had actually fallen over sideways, and check disk wasn't fixing things. So we had to call Microsoft, and I got a fantastic technician on the phone. This guy knew NTFS. He knew things about NTFS I didn't even know were a thing, right? So like we're actually in there looking at blocks. He's manually changing blocks inside of the file system. He fixed it, and I learned some stuff about NTFS that day that I never knew. Anyway, all good things must come to an end, unfortunately, I guess, because the last couple of years, I've seen a lot of negative experiences with Microsoft support over the years. I'm not bagging on Microsoft. I'm just saying, don't expect the same level of support every time you call, but hope for the best. And regardless of the level of support you're going to get, you want to come with a couple of key things every time you pick up that phone and start talking to support, right? You want the logs, or at least a quick way of retrieving the logs, and if you don't know exactly which logs to get. You need the version info, any recent changes that were made to the environment. And here's the really helpful bit. If you can do it, you can't always, depending on the situation, is repro steps, or the steps to reproduce the issue, right? Yeah. At a minimum, that's the type of stuff that you're going to want to provide to the tech and or whoever you talk to on the other line, right? But that at least
and the context that you have established early on in this process, right? The first thing we started talking about only happens on this computer, only happens to this user, happens to this group of users, only whatever that might be, right? Like only on Windows, not on Mac, or whatever it is.
Yep.
You want to narrow all this down and give that all to them. And as you say, it is definitely a hit and miss. I have dealt with many a support case. I have had the equivalent of your NTFS guy years ago with Microsoft.
Yep.
And I remember telling my students at the time, right, like you call Microsoft support, those guys don't give up. They're going to hang in there, right? And they used to. Support nowadays from Microsoft, which is the support I deal with, is very much hit and miss. I've had some amazing guys over the last couple of years, and girls, who've been like on the ball, and I've had some real haven't got a clue at all, right? Like they're talking to you is a complete waste of my time. And I have literally said to them, you need to get me somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not solving this problem because you know less about this than I do, and you have access to all the internal Microsoft information that we're not getting anywhere yet. So, I'm not going to gather more logs for you. You're going to need to put somebody else on the call because this is just not happening. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So good advice. I don't think I have anything else to add on this point. I have one more story I want to share, but before I do that, anything you want to add, Paul?
No, I think I've covered it all. It's sort of all coming back to me because I haven't been in the classroom teaching troubleshooting for years now. But it's sort of, as we're talking about it, there's all these tips and tricks that I'm thinking as it's coming back to me. But no, I think we've covered most of it. I think, I don't know that there's anything we have missed per se. I think we've covered it.
So one final piece of advice I would give, and this ties into this last story I want to tell. When you inherit a system or systems, maybe you take over as system admin for some place, whatever. When you inherit stuff, do not make assumptions. Also, do not assume that the documentation is 100% correct. So now you'll understand why I say that. So I took over, back in my MSP days, I took over as the administrator for internal systems. So that included on-premises Exchange at the time. Anybody remember on-premise Exchange? This guy, yeah.
Anyway,
I do. Yep, you do as well. Yep. So that included Exchange, some SQL boxes. It also included the core ticketing system that the MSP used. Now, that particular system was very finicky, very touchy, but it was mostly stable. So there was probably a 6-month period where some weeks it would be fine all week long. But then, the next week, it could be Tuesday afternoon and the whole system would just fall flat on its face. Nobody could access the application anymore. Okay, reboot the system. Magically solved. Okay, we have to work tickets. We're gonna get back on with our day, right? Couple more weeks goes by, same thing. Couple more weeks goes by, same thing. Could never reproduce the issue. And this is where the assumption part comes in, right? Like, I had inherited this system from somebody that had worked there. I assumed everything was as it should be, right? So I'm like, okay, what the heck is going on? Not even support really knew what was going on. Then one day, I was checking some networking settings and I stumbled upon the issue. And there's that joke out there that it's always DNS. This was a case where it was DNS, but it was intermittently DNS because there were 4 DNS sources configured on this particular system. 3 of the 4 were still viable. The 4th one was not. And this particular application, if it could not resolve DNS, would just go belly up. And so I guess whenever it was the 4th of the 4 defined, whenever, for whatever reason, it just decided to choose that DNS source, it would try to do a resolution, couldn't, and give up on its day, right? There was no logic baked in to be like, oh, okay, let me try one of the other defined sources. It just said, nope, I'm done, sorry, and goes belly up. So as soon as I saw that, I'm like, we removed that DNS server 8 months ago or whatever. Changed that, updated it, never had a problem again.
Never had a problem again. And somewhere, if that application was doing good logging, just tying back to the logging conversation we had earlier, somewhere there might have been an error message in the log that you might have been able to find if you knew where to look at. I actually did
think would have been nice.
I actually did think of something else that is really important when it comes to troubleshooting. It's taking a step back. Again, as technologists, we tend to be focused on the technical solution, right? Something technological isn't working, so we got to find the technological fix. But sometimes the right answer isn't actually that. Sometimes the right answer is taking a step back and saying, okay, this technological doohickey as part of this business process is behaving this way, which is making it impossible to do it in this way. Can we change what you do? Can we give you a workaround? Like, you can't get to this mailbox in Outlook. It's a weird problem. We spend an hour on it, but you need to get to this mailbox. Can you get to it in Outlook Web Access? Okay, for the next few weeks, you're just going to use Outlook Web Access to get to this mailbox. Sorry, that's just how it is. It's not worth time and money trying to figure this out, right? It's not worth it. We can look at it later on or something. So a workaround or what's the actual problem? Not the tech bit that isn't working, but what's the actual problem or what's the impact of that problem? That's taking that step back and saying, okay, hang on a second. We spend time on this now. Let's take a step back and see if there's something else, right? Oh, well, this computer that we've spent 2 hours troubleshooting is due to be replaced next month, and the new ones have actually come in. Okay, well, we're just going to chuck it in the bin. Here's your new computer. Congratulations, you're getting it a month earlier. Whatever the thing is, right? Like, you got to think about that bigger picture, because as tech people, we tend to be so focused on the details and so focused on the problem, right? And not taking a step back and thinking of the wider picture.
Yep. I have another quick one. Very similar. Had a customer that was always having email issues, emails disappearing, trouble moving mails between folders. Come to find out after, 10, 15 tickets, doing ticket analysis for this customer, why are they always having so many mail problems? Come to find out they were using the junkiest POP3 mail server on the planet. I don't even remember what it was. It was not some standard POP3 mail server. It wasn't even a popular open source one. I don't even remember what it was. I'm like, okay, can we get you guys? We had I don't remember what it was now, but we had a decent freemium type of IMAP service that we ran in our data center for those customers that didn't want to do on-premise Exchange at the time. And I mean, M365 wasn't even a twinkle in Microsoft's eye yet, So, I mean, that was a case where, okay, we're going to migrate you to this server because it's less problems for you, and by extension, it's less problems for us. So
That's right. That's right.
That's that take a step back and what is the real problem here, right? So
that's right. That's absolutely right. I'll give you one of my troubleshooting stories, and this is a very short one, and it's very funny. But I don't know that the junior people in the audience are necessarily going to relate to it. So this is a good 30 years plus ago. I'm working at a tech company. We're doing CAD, so computer-aided drawings and engineering stuff back in Sweden. And I'm trying to fax like a 7-page report to somebody. So fax, for those of you who don't know, was a machine you put papers into. It would scan these pieces of paper, send them as bits and bytes over to the other fax machine in the other end, and then print them out. Right? It was a way before we had email to send documents to other people, and you get a black and white thing come out on the other end. So I'm scanning this report, and then it stops working after like 3 pages. And I'm thinking, oh, it's going to be a problem here. And it's weird. So I call up the person in the other end, and this lady answers. So I explain it, and she says, yeah, I think there's something wrong with your paper because it keeps getting stuck in my machine. This was a client of ours at the time, and I obviously couldn't say, how fucking stupid are you? The paper is not being folded up and sent over the phone line. It's got nothing to do with my paper. But I couldn't say that, and I couldn't laugh at her in her face. So I sort of sat on the laugh until I hung up, and then I went and told my friends at the company, I was like, there's something wrong with your paper. It keeps getting stuck in my printer.
it was coming over via carrier pigeon.
Oh, it was so good. It was so good.
Oh man, that's one of the better ones I've heard before. So, and I also have to take a step back here and just acknowledge how old I feel due to the fact that we just had to explain what fax is.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Oh, look, mate, there's a lot of technologies I realize. Did I hear the other day? Oh, yeah. A kid, 5 years old, comes running into mum and dad and says, oh, I was over visiting my friends, and they had these really weird CDs, big and black CDs, really weird.
Oh, no.
And young kids today probably don't even know what a CD is because it's all streaming music nowadays, so they probably don't even know.
No joke. I don't know, it was an internet post I saw one time. Some guy in a tech forum was talking about how his son was talking about a friend's dad had a 3D printed save icon.
Mm-hmm.
It was a floppy disk.
Floppy disk. Yeah.
That's where the save icon came from. Yeah. 3D printed save icon. Well, I guess before I start feeling any older, Paul, it's a good spot for us to stop, I think. So.
Yeah, I think so too. But I do hope that was useful for the audience. I mean, this troubleshooting is a thing, no matter how good technology gets. It's definitely always going to be a thing. So wherever you are in the hierarchy, whether you're a dev or you're an IT pro or you're a manager or whatever, you're going to have to do troubleshooting at some point. So knowing the basics of how to do it properly is a good thing.
For sure. And folks, if you have any questions, maybe funny stories of your own, you can always reach us at contact@sysadminweekly.com. I'll get you into the inboxes over here, and happy to share any funny stories you may have on the show here. So with that, we'll let you all get back to your day. Just a couple of reminders here really quick. All of the various outlets and links associated with the show can be found at www.sysadminweekly.com. You can also see our companion newsletter at newsletter.sysadminweekly.com as well, too. So not only do we share the latest edition of the show, the latest episode, we also go back and look at a previous episode. We share a bunch of useful community links, any high impact CVEs that are out there, like the Citric Bleed 2 one is in the most recent newsletter edition. Useful tools, all kinds of different stuff. So if you're looking for some quick hitting resources that you can use in the trenches, highly recommend you check that out. Again, that's newsletter.sysadminweekly.com. With that, we'll let you get back to your day. Hope you enjoyed spending some time with us, and we'll catch you again next week for another episode of SysAdmin Weekly. Have a good one.